What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. Another Friday, another episode of Why Are We Bullish? We have an awesome panel tonight. All first timers to the show, which I'm very excited about. We also were discussing backstage, and apparently I've chosen a theme to the show this week. See if you can pick it out. Let us know in the comments if you know the running theme between all the guests. Nonetheless, very excited to have you all. We'll be bringing up the live chat and everything. So once it comes up on the screen, get those messages flying, and I will highlight any relevant ones that we see pop up. Of course, this is live. Anything can happen. So I defer to my friend Bill here.
We'll do it live.
Okay.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
If you have not already, please do hit like, subscribe, share, all those things. They help a ton getting this content in front of more eyeballs. In fact, that little like button is just down there. Slap it. Give it a smack. Anyways, I am Ben with the BTC Sessions. This is your daily session.
Hodl the Bitcoin.
Before we bring in our guests, let's take a look at where we are in the market right now. I'm bringing up timechaincalendar.com, and simultaneously I'm going to bring up the chat, so we will see those messages start to slide in now. But timechaincalendar.com, we're sitting at $33,866 per coin. A single US dollar will pick you up 2,953 sats. In terms of fees, next block, a little bump there, 25 sats per byte, anytime 4 sats per byte. Mempool is currently purging anything below 1.7 sats per VByte. And in terms of Bitcoin mined, 19.53 million of them. That's 92.98% of the entire supply. Shout out to sponsors of the show, hodlhodl.com. If you're stacking sats and you've got priorities in mind that include peer-to-peer trading, instant self-custody, no KYC. This is an easy place to go. You can sign up with nothing more than an email address. Once you're in, choose your currency, payment method, and amount, and start browsing offers immediately. Links are down below. Be sure to check them out. Now, when you do stack some non-KYC sats, you're going to want to store it in some of the best hardware on the market. I love CoinKite, everything they're doing. The Cold Card Mark IV is badass and is my go-to daily driver. I have all their other goodies like tap signers, sats cards, sorry, what am I saying here? Block clocks, open dimes, all that stuff. And I'm very excited. Rodolfo's been teasing me with tweets about Cold Card Q1 and the Sats link coming out soon. If you want to reserve any of those or pick up anything that I mentioned, head over to coinkite.com. You can use code BTC Sessions for 5% off everything. Backups, of course, are important if you want to protect your seed phrases from the elements. Seedor has you covered with the disk in capsule seed backup. It's great. I did a video on it. It's awesome. And one of the cool things about it, if you need to replace a new seed, you don't have to replace the entire item. You just pick up some cheap new disks to get inside of it, and then you're off to the races. So check them out. Links are down below based on your shipping preferences. Couple last ones. Nunchuk, killing it with assisted multi-sig. You can sign up for their Honey Badger program, in which they will hold one key in a multi-sig quorum and you hold the rest. The mobile app walks you through it. You can use things like tap signer, cold card, and others. And it has baked-in inheritance planning, so your sats get to your next of kin. And beyond that, the whole thing is no KYC, so you don't need to give up private info to have it set up and working for you. And finally, Start9, sovereign computing solution, plug-and-play solutions to run your entire Bitcoin stack and more. Basically, you can run Bitcoin Core, Lightning, Join Market, mempool.space, your data, files, passwords, photos, Nostra relays and clients, all that stuff. They've got everything from entry level up to what I'm running, which is the Server Pure, which they just discounted by a couple $100. And you can use code BTC Sessions with a little plus sign at the end and get an additional 18% off. So be sure to check them out. Links for everything I just said down below. But enough of my rambling, guys. Let's get in our guests. I want to welcome to the stage Peter and Portland Hodl and Rafa. Once I get up, there we go. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here. I think first off, before we do anything, we should do a quick round of intros so that anybody unfamiliar with you can get acquainted. So I'll shoot it over to Peter first, and I'm just going to ask, who are you and what do you do?
My name is Peter Dunworth. Excuse me. I work at the Bitcoin Advisor, help start that up. And what we do is collaborative custody. We help clients get Bitcoin off the exchanges and into a safe inheritance protocol that ensures that if they get hit by a bus, they're going to recover their Bitcoin and their family's not going to lose it. So that's what I do.
It could be a bus or a boat. It might be a boat. And there's many of those styles of accidents. So yeah, just an idea for your marketing. You could throw
Thank
that
you.
in. Yeah, no, that one's for free. Glad to have you, man. And it was really good.
Thank
I got
you.
you down in LA, so I'm glad to have you on the show. I'll toss it over to Portland, dude. I also, if I'm not mistaken, did we meet in LA a year ago?
Are you talking to me or Peter?
No, Portland.
No, I have stayed away from the LA area for a little bit. But yeah, with that said, I've been to one conference total. That was TabConf 2023. That was absolutely fantastic. Anybody that's into Bitcoin development, that would be I'm pretty sure it's the go-to. I haven't experienced others, but a lot of really high signal coming out of that conference specifically. That's actually a reason to be bullish, is that going there, you'll see how many developments are happening on the base layer, and then the lightning developments that are coming out are just up and to the right, parabolic. But yeah, with that said, I'm Portland Hodl. I'm known primarily for Bitcoin education on Twitter Spaces and doing slide decks. So I will post a primary title slide with a bunch of little things below it. And then the second thing, also, I'm a Bitcoin Core contributor. I wouldn't say is prominent of a developer such as like Andrew Chow, Merch, etc. But still, I do contribute my time for free to Bitcoin Core to help make it a solid consumable experience for everybody that doesn't break. So that's very important. If you ask any hodler what the most important thing is, don't break Bitcoin from the devs. So
I love it.
That's kind of that's where I would go. So
also, I got to give you props. The other night, everybody was excited. There's a whole bunch of spaces, and it was all just like price talk and everything. And then you're there, just absolute legend, just teaching people about Sparrow Wallet on a spaces, and the space started small and then just started growing because there's value in education. And it's fun to get excited if your purchasing power goes up, but you got to learn the tools. And for you to be out there in the midst of all of the excitement and perhaps irrational exuberance and be up there and just spending the time through the noise, still educating people, my hat is off to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks. But one note, that space was already planned ahead of time by a week. So it's part of the schedule. It just happened to be during that time. I'm pretty price insensitive at this point. Like the technology and basically the ability to be sovereign is much more important than the temporary fiat price. It does its thing up and down. I am very bullish on Bitcoin as a technology mainly. But yeah, with that said, there was a little bit of contrast that was pretty interesting in that space, is that a lot of people want the ETF to pump their bags, right? Like bring me the USD exchange rate higher. But Sparrow Wallet is the best self-custody tool on earth, in my opinion, combined with a great hardware wallet. And so you have people that are getting very excited about somebody else custodying their Bitcoin to pump the price. Meanwhile, you have these people that are very interested in, like, how do I actually get the real benefits from Bitcoin? Like the good stuff, So yeah, that was a really nice night, and I appreciate everybody that participated that evening. That was great.
That's awesome, man. Well, I'm glad to have you, and we'll toss it down the line once more to Rafa. Welcome, man. I'm glad to have you. Can you let people know who you are and what you do?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah. So I'm Rafael Cordon. I am CEO at Simple Proof. Simple Proof is a company that we help safeguard public documents for institutions. Part of our solution includes timestamping documents on the Bitcoin blockchain. I've been involved in Bitcoin for several years. I was a CTO at a Lightning payments company as well.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm very glad to have you. You're doing some interesting stuff, and perhaps we'll get to chat about it a bit more depending on your reason for being bullish. But nonetheless, I'm very glad to have you here. And gentlemen, awesome. Let's dive into it. So everybody in the chat, first off, welcome. So I see a whole bunch of people. I see Simmer and Matt and Nick and Daz and everybody in there. Thank you guys for being here. Of course, keep those messages coming. But this is Why Are We Bullish? And anybody unfamiliar with the show, pretty simple premise. Each one of us comes with a reason for being bullish. It can be anything. It can be a personal experience. It could be a new app or a device or an item of news, really whatever we decide. And the flow of the show is as follows. Number one, somebody's going to drop a reason why they are bullish. That's their chance to rant and get whatever's off their chest, whatever's top of mind. Number two, all together, we're going to riff on that reason, comments, questions, whatever it may be, whatever rabbit holes we decide to go down. And then finally, number three, we're going to rotate to the next person until we've all had a turn. So reason, riff, rotate. That is it. And I'm going to get us started this week with my reason for being bullish. And I'll just dive right in. So the reason I'm bullish this week is actually a combination of a couple things. I guess the foundation of why I'm bullish is something called BIP 85. And so BIP 85, what this allows one to do is you can have a seed phrase that has been created. And for instance, on something like a cold card or maybe a seed signer, and I think some other hardware devices allow you to do this natively as well. You can effectively turn that into like a parent seed or a master seed in which you can spit off a bunch of child seed phrases as well. And what happens with these child seed phrases is that each individual child seed that is spit off is in a way segregated from the parent. And what I mean by that is if one of these child seed phrases that was spit off gets compromised, there's no way to work backwards to compromise the parent. And so what you can have, and what I've begun to do, is you can have perhaps a parent cold card or whatever device you decide, and you can spit off all of these child seeds, and you can use them for various purposes. In my case, I like to use them quite a bit for hot wallets that I'm using. I experiment with a ton of different wallets, and it's kind of a pain in the ass to keep track of a whole bunch of seed phrases all over the place. And every time that I'm looking through notebooks or whatever, and I find a seed phrase, I'm like, oh, I can't remember what this is for, or maybe it was not labeled, or maybe I'm like, what if I get rid of this seed phrase and I find out that an address is somewhere out there and somebody ends up sending Bitcoin to it, and I have the horrible realization that there's Bitcoin I can no longer access. Well, that starts to go away when every time you want a new wallet for a random purpose, especially hot wallets, things like that, you generate it through BIP 85 with kind of a master seed that you keep very careful control and keep it very safe. So what I did this week is, and again, I've done this for other use cases, is I was experimenting with Mutiny Wallet. And so Mutiny Wallet is a mobile application, in fact, a progressive web app, which means you don't have to use the App Store to get it. And you can go through a browser, and then you can install it as an app just from the browser onto your device. And it can generate a seed for you. But instead, what I did is I generated a seed from my cold card, took those 12 words, plunked it into Mutiny. It will be exclusively used for Mutiny. And then I just have a little spreadsheet of, hey, what index number or what quote unquote account number was this from my cold card or from that master seed. And so why do this? What the hell is the point of doing that? Well, now for Mutiny Wallet, I no longer need to have an additional seed phrase sitting around and kept safe. And so what can happen is, if I delete the app off my phone, or I break my phone, or whatever happens, I go, oh God, my wallet, what am I going to do? I don't have the seed phrase. And no, now I go back to my cold card and I say, all right, what was index number 6 or whatever it was? And it spits out 12 words. And then I pull up Mutiny and I hit recover wallet and I put in those 12 words, and boom, there it is. So this is kind of a portion of what I'm bullish about. But then this is just part of my experimentation this week. So I'm going to break down what I did. This was my experience playing with Mutiny this week. So first, I did the BIP85 thing that I'm talking about. I spit out a seed phrase from my cold card, of which, again, if I delete Mutiny, I can go back to my cold card and regenerate it. In fact, even if I lose my cold card and I've got the seed backup of that, I can just use the seed and put it back into a cold card or a seed signer or whatever, and then regenerate my Mutiny wallet later. So I've got like layers of redundancy there, which is amazing. But nonetheless, I did that. I imported it to Mutiny Wallet. I then, because Mutiny Wallet, basically everything is automated in the background, Lightning-wise, more or less. I was able to just instantly send a Lightning transaction to it and have a Lightning channel automatically established with it. Of course, there's a Lightning service provider involved. There's a fee to do that, but I didn't have to think. I just sent and it arrived. Then I was able to take my NPub, which is kind of like your public key or your identifier on Nostr. And I was able to plunk that into Mutiny Wallet. And what did it do? It imports all of my Nostr contacts as potential payees, as potential contacts that I could send Lightning payments to. Just natively in the app, I can scroll through my contacts and send them payments if I want. Then I was able to use another amazing tool called Nostr Wallet Connect. So I jumped onto my Nostr client on my phone and I said, hey, I'd like to integrate my Mutiny wallet with this. And what that does is every time I hit the zap button, which anybody not on Nostr, basically instead of liking things, it's actually monetized. You can zap somebody with whatever you want, 10 sats, something like that, 21 sats, 1,000 sats, doesn't matter. You can set a budget. And now when I tap that button, it automatically pulls the payment from Mutiny Wallet and it goes to the intended recipient. So I set that up and linked it all together. And then I literally had just an integrated social media network, decentralized social media platform on my phone, integrated with a native Lightning wallet that I didn't have to go through an app store to get, that was backed up by my cold card. And the play together of all these pieces, and granted, not everybody's going to do this. I know that's a whole lot of steps. I know that's a whole lot of crap that I just threw out there into the ether here. But the fact—
I'm doing it as we speak.
Yeah, yes, I love it. I love it. Awesome. But I mean, the fact that I could kind of do all of that stuff and have it integrated and just have it work is amazing. Like, I remember getting my first Lightning wallet in 2018, and I mean, the experience today is entirely different. And in 2017, it didn't exist, right? Nostr, I just started using it in January, and the experience then, I mean, you look at the interfaces now and all of the integrations and what you can do. And if you look at my January Nostr tutorial, it's laughable how out of date it is. And so all of these things combined, it just collectively blew my mind on how far we've come with all of this stuff, but also how far we have yet to go, because I feel like all of the stuff I just described soon will be done with a few clicks, and that will be incredible. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I'm curious your guys' thoughts on, again, where we're at, where we've been, and where we're going in and around any of this stuff. So whoever wants to dive in, I'm all ears, man.
I'll dive in real quick. Yeah, so in terms of the actual progression, I apologize real quick. Is my mic volume better? That was an issue in the beginning.
Your ears, I think you're sounding pretty good. I'll chat, let us know, but it's sounding
Yeah,
good.
please. Yeah. No, I apologize. Linux computers and USB devices, bad. But yeah, in terms of just watching the progression of even self-custody solutions, what we used to do with wallet.dat files and putting them on CDs and all sorts of these weird things that were completely not okay with what we got today, to basically having cold cards and jades and all these devices that are very deeply integrated to your experience, where you're literally using your private key to generate children private keys that you then use for Lightning nodes to connect to Nostr. The really only thing that is kind of missing is UI and cohesion between all these different pieces, right? Because you have your setup is bad, like really language. What kind of words are okay on this? Like badass, is that okay? Okay, yeah, it's like your setup's badass, but at the same time, the amount of steps you had to do, it was quite a few like little pieces. And as we go forward, that's kind of what I see on kind of the lowest hanging fruit for Bitcoin to really make this cohesive is basically connecting these things and making this process a little bit simpler in terms of basically getting information to point A to point B and linking it all together without having to find multiple tutorials, etc. But yeah, I'm definitely excited for what the future holds in terms of that. And then in terms of what you were talking about, the actual BIP85 derivation, I found out something really cool and I'm bullish about, and I'll go over that later. But the seed vault that came out in Cold Card version 5.2.0, you can combine that with the BIP85 to do some interesting things. So, but yeah.
I'm very excited about that now because that's something I haven't yet dove into. So I'm thoroughly anticipating the dive into your topic here. Then awesome, sweet. Well, I'm curious. Maybe I'll toss it to Peter and then Rafa. I'm just curious if you guys have thoughts in and around any of the stuff really that we dove down here.
I'm excited to hear more about the BIP85 when it comes to sort of family planning. All of a sudden, we can start giving, child seeds to children to, operate Bitcoin and know that we've got a safe recovery for them. Every sat is precious, and I'm just conscious of that we don't want to lose any of them. But having that ability to back it up, it also probably has connotations and permutations into the multisig realm, which is where I spend a lot of time. So for me, this is a new rabbit hole for me to go down and think, how can we implement from a day-to-day perspective with that sort of thing? Because all of the things that are coming and that are here now, I think is just a progression. It's just it is getting infinitely better than what it was. And I laugh when I heard you talk about your experience in 2018 with the Lightning Network. I tried that back then too, and it's been a while since it scared me off for a couple of years to get back there. But as these things iterate and get faster and quicker and better and easier, and the user experience improves, all of a sudden it's a step function change in technology that that was 5 years ago. And fast forward 5 years where we're doing things that we didn't really think was possible. So yeah, it's hard not to be bullish on that.
I think you're super right on the idea, especially around like family members that are, you want them to try, you want them to take some personal responsibility and have that feeling, but also the family members that aren't fully orange pilled but are just enough to, okay, I got some Bitcoin and I'm going to try and store it myself, but like I'm not really putting in the work yet. This is and when I first covered BIP85 as a bit of a tutorial, I did it in the context of like an Uncle Jim kind of setup where you're like, all right, mom, you got your hardware wallet and you got your words, and you have two things to take care of. Do not lose either of them, but if you lose or wreck the device, you've always got the words backed up. And then you could even have it so unbeknownst to her, the words are actually a derived BIP85 index. And so you go to mom and say, oh, like Bitcoin is now a global standard. Let's go buy you a home, all that kind of stuff. And she goes, oh, I don't have my device or my words. You can say, okay, well, lucky for you, I'm a great son. And I've got a derivation of your seed here that we can now use, that we can recover with, and never ever do that again. And so like you can have your families back in that way and set them up in a way where you're kind of like that last line of defense. I think that's incredibly useful. And also to your 2018 point, I think part of the lack of enjoyment of my first foray into Lightning was I had no idea what it was and what it was supposed to be. And I thought it was just going to be, well, I'll just download this wallet and send Bitcoin to it, and it will just be faster. And the funny thing is, while that wasn't the case then, it actually is becoming the case now. It's becoming the case where you can download a wallet and then send a regular Bitcoin transaction to it, and then it is just faster and cheaper because it auto swaps to Lightning. So my expectation on my first foray into Lightning being completely shattered is actually coming to fruition today, which is really cool to see. So yeah, Rafa, I want to toss it to you. I want to get your thoughts as well.
On why I'm bullish Bitcoin.
I want to get your thoughts on anything that we've mentioned here, just in terms of you know, kind of where we've previously been with Bitcoin versus, you know, where we are now with some of the crazy stuff that we've been describing and talking about, and you know, how much better it can get from here, I suppose.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to be deeply involved in the launch of the Chivo wallet, the government wallet in El Salvador on the Lightning side. I'm bullish Bitcoin on you know, Lightning. It's so easy to use now. And I think Lightning adoption, in at least in countries like Guatemala, El Salvador, Central America, it reduces remittance fees by like an order of magnitude. So definitely there's an opportunity. There's a huge opportunity there. There are startups like Osmo Wallet in Guatemala who are, you know, gaining speed, and also sort of using the infrastructure that already exists for paying out remittances through traditional channels such as MoneyGram and Western Union, leveraging that existing infrastructure to provide cash out points for Lightning payments. So that is going to be an incredible thing, and it's just growing in this region.
Yeah, and
I mean Guatemala, by the way.
yeah, and none of this would have been possible, again, like jumping back to even just a couple of years ago with Lightning. Like this kind of stuff, you know, and not very far back in our history was just a pipe dream. And now you're starting to see all these rails be established, and you're starting to see this infrastructure actually work for people. And again, there's work to be done. Obviously, not everything is perfect. I don't know how many times I download a wallet and try it, and I run into issues, but far more seldom than any time before. And there's answers to many of the problems that we're seeing. And so I just think so much is being done, and the world is just starting to see that this stuff can and is working. And I can only imagine, and the world's always so slow to realize how much stuff is working. And so, you know, we'll get to the point where we're like, wow, almost everything is working perfectly. And then like 2 years later, the rest of the world will be like, where did this come from? It's amazing. And we'll be saying, we've been screaming it from the rooftops for years. And,
yeah. One thing that happened that's interesting, like our Simple Proof, the startup that we founded with a couple of friends, what we are doing is we are timestamping the elections documents. So Guatemala had elections recently, and basically the government of Guatemala hired us to plug in to the system where the scanned images of vote tally sheets are going in. And so we are taking those scanned images and storing the hash on the Bitcoin blockchain. And we are like, I'm very happy with this, because we see people that I didn't even know, like the Bitcoin community in Guatemala is not that big. People who are coming out and saying, hey, like, results cannot be altered, like documents cannot be altered anymore because they're stored on the Bitcoin blockchain. We're using the open timestamps protocol that was developed by Peter Todd back in 2016. And so it's an open source protocol. Anybody can use it. And so I'm very happy because I'm seeing adoption. Of course, here I'm on a specific area of open timestamps. That's like the world that I'm in right now for the last 6 months. But people are opening their eyes to the power of Bitcoin, even more, beyond a currency, right? Just as this sort of immutable database. And so, that's another thing that I'm bullish about.
That's, again, this topic is super interesting. I want to dive into it in in detail more. I might depending on where we go when we get over to you. I want to get down to some of the nitty gritty. I'm hoping that we go down this rabbit hole because it's super interesting, and I want to kind of dive into exactly what's happening there. But before we do, I'm going to do a rotation here, and actually, you know what? I'm going to put a bow on this kind of my BIP 85 and all of the other. I kind of just threw everything in the kitchen sink at this reason this week, but nonetheless, was very excited about it. But I think, Rafa, maybe this is a good segue to go directly into, and I don't know if your reason for being bullish is in and around the Guatemalan election stuff, or if it was something that you wanted, another rabbit hole you wanted to go down.
I'm bullish Bitcoin because Bitcoin is freedom, and anything that enables freedom, is gonna be people are gonna use it.
I love it. Okay, well, is it cool with you if we dive into your topic. Sure. And go down? So I'll let you kind of give a little preamble of whatever you're going to say, but I'm going to so this is basically me queuing you up for why are you bullish. But I would love to dive into some of the election and timestamp stuff as well, if that's not your reason. Then so, anyways, I'll toss it to you. Why are you bullish?
As I said, because Bitcoin is freedom, and anything that enables freedom gets adopted by people. Freedom of speech. The internet was a way to share information freely. Bitcoin is a way to share value freely. But on the Guatemalan elections, if you want me to dive on that?
Let's talk about that. First of all, can you? Maybe I'll because I did watch something on kind of what you guys were able to do. So is it cool if I kind of start with some questions in and around it and kind of you because it took a while for me to understand it. So maybe can you start with before you guys started doing what you're doing now? How did the elections in Guatemala work? What were the problems that you saw, and where were they manifesting?
So Guatemala, just for people who don't know where it is, Guatemala is between Mexico and El Salvador. Guatemala City, the capital of Guatemala, is a 4-hour drive from San Salvador, the capital of El Salvador. So we're super close neighbors with El Salvador. So Guatemalan election in Guatemala, as well as a relatively new democracy. The constitution is from 1983. Prior to that, there were 30 years of military dictatorships. So it's a relatively new country. Guacamole sounds good for a mushroom. I'm just looking at the comments. Guatemala.
Solid effort.
So Guatemala's election process is all paper-based. Mm-hmm. You have, and it's all run by volunteer citizens. It's decentralized in a physical manner. So 125 volunteer citizens run these tables. There are 25,000 tables in the country where they receive votes. People, fill out a ballot by hand. They deposit it in a bag, and then at the end of the day, those ballots are closed, and somebody starts counting. The 5 people that run the table, they start counting the votes, and they generate this tally sheet, which they sign. They do the counting in front of auditors from different political parties. So observers from parties, or international or local elections observers, they all see when the votes are counted. And so these tally sheets are the votes are tallied up, and then they're fed into a scanner. And this scanner feeds the document into a preliminary results transmission system. They call it TREP in Spanish. And this preliminary results transmission system, or TREP, is where people can see in real time how the votes are being counted. It's what's being shown on TV and media. These are how the votes are coming in, and so and that's the digital part, and then the paper part also, takes its own path where votes are going to be certified manually by, doing this manual count. But on the digital side, what happens is there are, an army of people that are just, doing the data entry. They see the document on their screen and they do the data entry, and that feeds the results, the TRIP system. And back in 2019, what happened is that a group of activist citizens were downloading the tally sheet images from the official elections website, and they realized that tally sheet images would come in, then they would be deleted, and new tally sheet images would come in. There was a weird behavior. They don't know if it was like, on purpose, somebody doing something wrong, or just the system had problems. The IT director for the Elections Tribunal back in the 2019 elections, he's in jail now because of issues that happened. And so there was like sketchy behavior going on. And so these guys that did this was just a citizen effort. They were also timestamping the documents using open timestamps. And they realized, okay, there's something going on, and they started making a lot of noise after the elections about this. And so the new authorities that run the elections board, this time they were more open to listening. Okay, how can we build solutions to sort of help, bring more certainty into the process? And we were able to pitch to them, hey, why don't we timestamp the documents as soon as they get scanned in order to have this immutable certainty of a document that was used to feed the vote, the data entry system. And so that's what we did. And in this time, everything worked perfectly, both for the first election and for the runoff election.
This is super interesting because, again, like you were saying, there were, these documents. Effectively, you've got, as the votes are being tallied in a room around a table, you've got representatives from every political party present, basically saying like, yes, we can clearly see the votes here. And that's kind of like their one proof of work and their validation. Like all the nodes in the network are the people in those rooms looking and verifying what's happening. But as soon as that data is collected and then uploaded, there's a disconnect between what can be presented to the public and what actually happened in those rooms. And it can be retracted and changed and everything. But the second that you have, and the interesting thing that I found about it when I was watching this mini documentary about it was, it's done in a way that doesn't take a whole lot of data in and around the Bitcoin blockchain, because it's like it's a hash of the actual document. So it keeps it very, very light. And so you're basically taking this digital document, this image, and hashing it, and then putting that as part of the timestamp. And so then somebody can then take the original digital document, and if anything has been altered on it, and then they check the hash, it won't equate. Like you're basically asking, is this document the one that was timestamped at that moment in time? And you can very quickly find out yes or no. And if you've screwed with it since that point in time, then there's irrefutable evidence that it is not the same as whatever was entered at that time. And so basically, it's a proof of sequence of events is what it is, because you've got the nodes in the network verifying what is true in the room. You've got the people saying this document is the real one. This document is the one being scanned, and this document is the one I'm seeing that is represented in the timestamp in front of us. And then if anything different happens afterwards, then you know there's a problem. And it's very interesting to me that as soon as you introduce that mechanism, all of a sudden the fraud disappears. It's amazing. Like how does that happen? Now, it's not to say that now this attacks like a sequence. This prevents an attack in the form of a sequence of events, right? There's a possibility if you had people in a room that were coerced to upload incorrect data. It doesn't fix that. It just fixes the sequencing of events that has happened. So as long as you've got groups of people in rooms around the country that are saying, this is the data that we approve of, and that gets timestamped and uploaded and everything, then you're good. If you have men with guns in every single one of those rooms, it obviously doesn't stop that, but it stops easy, we'll just change the document. It raises the bar to influencing an election in incorrect way, I think is
especially with all the new AI tools and deep fakes and all that all the tools where you can pretty much very easily do a batch update and change a bunch of documents. And so the way we presented it to the elections authorities is like, what's going to happen when after the election, a week later, someone's going to come with an image of an altered tally sheet and say, hey, you used the wrong one. This is the real one, right? How can you prove which tally sheet you used and when that tally sheet was generated and fed into the system? And so I think it's a way to protect, the people who are involved in the elections process for them to prove, hey, this is the information that we used. It was not altered afterwards, and I think that's the value there.
You in the chat here, you shared a link, but anybody that wants to see what's happening here, there's a short, like 17-minute documentary about this called Immutable Democracy, and it's from the Simple Proof YouTube channel. And so honestly, it's given kind of the scale of which you were able to stop election fraud using this simple tool, it's criminally underviewed. It's got, it's getting close to around 2,000 views. So if you guys are curious and you want to learn more about kind of what they're doing in a in my opinion, non-detrimental way to the Bitcoin blockchain, like you guys aren't loading the chain with like tons of data. It's literally just like, it's a hash and it's very lightweight. It's just kind of like a true or false mechanism. And so if you guys want to go check it out, again, Immutable Democracy on YouTube, and it's from Simple Proof. And watch it. If you find it compelling, share it, because I think it's really cool. I think it's super interesting. So is there anything else that you want to point people to? Because I want to get thoughts from Portland and from Peter as well after.
No, just maybe share the opentimestamps.org website. That there you can see the protocol that Peter Todd developed. And what's cool about it is that you're not storing each individual hash in a Bitcoin transaction for like each hash of a document. The protocol generates a Merkle tree. And so you're just storing the root hash. So you can store a bunch of documents on a single Bitcoin transaction. The protocol provides a way for finding a specific hash of a document within a Bitcoin block. That's the website. Mm-hmm.
That's super cool. Awesome. Well, maybe I'll toss it over to, I don't know, whoever wants to attack it first. I mean, maybe we'll go Peter and then we'll go Portland. So I don't know, Peter, like, do you have thoughts on kind of what you've been hearing here?
I do. I think, anything that can improve election integrity is a really important thing. And that goes for all countries. I used to think it was a third world thing, but, maybe I'm a little more skeptical now becoming a Bitcoiner that I think that fraud and disingenuous voting is apparent across all countries. It doesn't matter where you are. So I think some sort of timestamping that helps to seek out fraud and misinformation on that is a really important tool, because what we're seeing I guess across the globe is a degradation of trust, and these open timestamps is a way of reinforcing, much like Bitcoin, trust in the system and actually believing in things that we're actually told, whereas at the moment there's a lot of reasons not to believe what we're told. And so anything that can reinforce or build a trustless society where there is actually proof behind it that we can verify on a personal level, I think adds to the cohesion of society on a broader level. So I'd love to see this implemented not just in Guatemala but across the board globally.
I think you've hit on something very important and very broad here, in that you're right. There's this total lack of trust everywhere, and I think that it you know, and this is the type of thing where I say it, and all of us to a degree would probably not in agreement, but the average person would go, you're a crazy person. But it does whittle down to, in essence, the money, because it, like, at a base level, yes, there are lies and mistruths and stuff communicated in other ways. But when you've got a society and you've got, this mechanism in which you use to communicate everyone's value, and their blood, sweat, and tears are poured into this mechanism where they communicate what they value and what they want out of life through this. If that thing is broken and is based on a lie, and you can siphon away somebody's values with the flick of a button, then that breaks this social cohesion and this understanding and this communication amongst everyone. And it's no wonder that everybody currently doesn't trust anything, because they hear one thing and they experience the opposite. And so it's kind of interesting that in this instance, we've first fixed the money, and quite literally using the money, you're starting to see the first implications of fixing the world, as the old trope goes. Literally, fix the money, fix the world, and the money is fixing the world. So super cool. But Portland, I want to toss it to you, and I'm curious your thoughts on what you're hearing here.
I think that is an absolutely excellent use of the Bitcoin time chain to immutably cement a hash or a fingerprint of a document at a moment in time. There are some notable kind of little issues that come up that could potentially be a problem. That is still an Oracle problem. Is that document that got hashed even the correct version of the document? But one nice part that you mentioned about open timestamps, it seems like you can create a Merkle tree. So you can have like the master hash, and you could have a hash of all the documents inside. So technically, you could actually hash the individual votes themselves. So you could tally up the inputs to get to that master tally sheet. So that was kind of my original thought as you were speaking, is like, okay, they do a tally sheet, but is the tally sheet accurate? And like, technically you could go to the level of like, hey, we will just have each individual vote also hashed along with it. You can put it all together. So yeah, that's a really excellent way of using the Bitcoin time chain. And at its heart, the Bitcoin time chain is actually a signed messages protocol. When you sign off a Bitcoin transaction, you're actually just signing a script or a message. But when you send Bitcoin, you're attaching a value or an amount to it. So Bitcoin at its heart is just a messaging protocol. It just has money attached to it. So that's an absolutely excellent use. And the open timestamps, I believe, uses an op return. Is that correct? Yeah. So as such, the total broadcastable kind of weight you can put on the time chain at one moment is 80 bytes. That's basically nothing. An inscription, a stamp, or somebody using Pay to multisig to just kind of encode a bunch of data into these addresses, it's far worse than what that is doing. So to kind of put a check and balance on an election in terms of just, we know something existed at this moment in time that represents this for 80 bytes, save the world? Yeah, take it.
Easy win, I suppose.
Yeah, but you got to pay a fee, right? Somebody's got to pay a little Bitcoin to get it on chain. Okay, actually, that's my second question. Okay, let's say I was a malicious actor. Okay, I am the party that is going to be losing this election for sure. Like, it's undoubtedly to the populace's mind, in the votes that actually happen, I'm losing. What if I submit a fake tally sheet in the same block? Like, I know that this tally sheet hash of this stuff is coming out at block height 830,000 for this election, for example. Why don't I just kind of, hey, have my secretary make me one of these. I'm going to make a hash of this, and I'm going to fraudulently upload mine as well. How do you settle a dispute in terms of who is right? Do you sign these things, or does that make sense?
Yeah, that's that is the next. That's one of the issues right now, the next step is incorporating digital signatures like PGP onto the document. So, our first version of Simple Proof doesn't incorporate that, but the next version would be something like a DocuSign, and the DocuSign timestamp, uses open timestamps. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, that would work excellent. You could actually just GPG sign it with a known key from a trusted entity as well.
Mm-hmm.
Or multiple, right?
True. Yeah, absolutely.
And then you could catch people on a lie, right? If they're
that's gonna be the best. Bitcoin prevents election fraud provably.
That's super interesting.
And it's a cool way because we're putting Bitcoin into the government, but in not in a financial way where like, all the things that happen, but Bitcoin starts going into government, and government people don't even realize. It's the same with cloud computing, because the issue when you talk about cloud with governments is like, where's my data? My data has to be here, and then you ask them, where's your email? Oh, I use Gmail, I use or Microsoft 365. So your email is already on the cloud, right? And so that's sort of an argument. And we start doing this for other governments. It's like, hey, I don't want to touch Bitcoin, but you're already using Bitcoin to safeguard all your most important public documents, right? So that's what I would like.
I can imagine just like this is on the fringe and the edge, but election fraud is being checked, right? And so they go back to this open timestamp. There's going to be some guy who doesn't understand Bitcoin in the room. How do we undo 585 blocks to get back to this timestamp and rewrite it in the time chain? And some guy's going to go, you will need a lot of miners and a lot of energy, and you will have to spend a lot of time to do this. It's not possible.
Don't worry, we'll just have to hijack the entire United States electricity grid for a period of time, and
it's game theory, right? It doesn't make any sense. There's no reason to do it at that point. So Satoshi wins again.
I love that. I think that should be every time that Bitcoin screws somebody who's been trying to screw society. That should be the quote. Satoshi wins again. I love it. Awesome. All right, well, gentlemen. Okay, so I thoroughly enjoy this topic. Again, anybody who wants to check it out, head over to YouTube, search Immutable Democracy from the Simple Proof YouTube channel. Watch it. Again, 16, 17 minutes long. It's awesome. Love to get your thoughts and give it a share if you find it interesting. Also, opentimestamps.org is where you can find out about the technology actually being used. So with that, we're going to do a rotation and we're going to dive into our next reason for being bullish. Everybody in the chat, thank you so much for all the messages and everything coming through. There's a fun one. Hopefully that is not not going to dox Portland, but I'm going to put it up anyways because it's guess the car Portland Hodl is in.
You won't guess it. But I do have a name for my vehicle. It is called the Stackmobile, and my fiance calls it Humblebee because I literally bought it for a very cheap price, and I have literally stacked Bitcoin instead of making car payments and insurance payments. And guess what? Now I don't even want a nice car. But yeah, it's a great studio hosting environment for me. I do a lot of spaces out of here. So
Humblebee, I love it. That needs to be a meme. I think that's great. All right, so gentlemen, we're gonna do a rotation. Peter, I'm gonna cue you up next, and I'm gonna toss it to you. And I'm again, same simple question: why are you bullish? Take it away.
You know what? It's hard not to be bullish at the moment. I think Bitcoin offers hope for humanity. And I spend a lot of my time and background has been in the finance sector. And I feel like in the next 6 to 12, 24 months, we're going to see Bitcoin absolutely hit prime time in that field. And just going down a list of things that I think will happen over the next, say, five years with Bitcoin. Dare I say it, we could see the super cycle starting, or this could be the start of a super cycle. I understand how contentious that is, but if I sort of go down the list of things that we've got in the next 12 months, we've got the ETF, we've got the halving, we've got the very real possibility that interest rates are going to drop. We're going to have quantitative easing, where cash coming back into the market on behalf of the governments. I think there's going to be a major oil producers start accepting Bitcoin for the oil or energy that they produce, and that's going to be a huge amount of demand. And then we're going to see potentially bonds backed by Bitcoin, or we'll see a flow out of bonds into Bitcoin. And to give you an idea of how big these markets are relative to what Bitcoin is right now, and I'll just start with the ETF. So, we've been giving advice on Bitcoin from a financial perspective for the last 7 years. And when we first started, we were only able to talk about Bitcoin being a 1% to 2% allocation of your total investable assets, because it represented an existential threat to your career as a financial or investment advisor. Having, in the last week, Larry Fink, the head of the biggest asset management company in the world, come out and say that he thinks it's a flight to quality, all of a sudden that allows any investment advisor worth their salt to have an allocation of somewhere between 5, 10, or maybe even 20% of a client's portfolio. That may seem pretty bullish, but that represents a huge amount of capital that's going to flow into this space. The halving, obviously, I think in contextual terms will be less of a big deal in relative to previous halvings, but it's still a big event in the Bitcoin community. And then we've got interest rates coming down, and that's going to inject liquidity of some sort, and you're going to have governments having to print money to put money in. And where does money flow when money's easy? It flows to what's perceived as the highest risk assets. Although Larry Fink doesn't think it's a high risk asset, the rest of the world does. And we're going to see, I think, the mother of all short squeezes on Bitcoin, and we're going to see demand just totally outstrip supply. And you couple those demand drivers with the fact that Bitcoin's running off exchange like at rates we've never seen before. We've had 1.2 million coins run off exchange in the last 3 or 4 years. This sets up a demand supply curve like I've never seen before. There's nothing that exists like it. And when you couple absolute digital scarcity into the supply side, I think we're going to see things that no one believed possible in the next few years. And to put this in a context of what we're sort of seeing, or what I think could happen, if you denominated daily oil trade in Bitcoin terms, that's roughly $10 billion of demand daily for Bitcoin, or 2.5 Michael Saylors entering the market every single day. That's a lot of Bitcoin. That dude's got 150,000 Bitcoin in his control. It's like all of a sudden these demand supply curves just get totally put out of whack. And then you look at the bond market, $60 trillion worth of bonds gets rolled over every year or refinanced or issued. If we had 5% of that going into the market, that's $3 trillion. Now, that's 7.5 Michael Saylors, or 14 Michael Saylors a week, 2 Michael Saylors a day coming in every single day. Like,
we
the numbers
and sailors from now on.
I've got a meme just how many Michael Saylors for each market entering the market, and this is where at the same time we've got supply just running off exchanges, and the problem is I don't think any of us really understand what this is. And one of the things that I saw this week, which I was really happy to see sort of brought to fruition, or rediscussed on Twitter, was the multiplier. Initially, I think Luke Mikic did a great job talking about it, and Rip Von Winkle did a really good thread recently this week where, all of a sudden $1 into into Bitcoin has an outsized return of increasing market cap by 20, 30, 40, 50, or maybe even 100x. And as Bitcoins come off exchange and the demand goes up, the multiplier effect actually goes up in value, not down in value. So at the moment, we might have $1 go into Bitcoin and it increases the market cap by 20x. But fast forward to those situations that I explained, $1 could have 100 or 200x multiplier effect on the total market cap of Bitcoin. And this is where I don't think any of us are bullish enough that none of us have enough Bitcoin. And when this thing really starts to rip, it's going to be a lot of fun. But the interesting thing about that is I don't know when it's going to happen. It's just a waiting game. And this is, I guess, part of what's so important about what we all do, is try to educate people on what this thing can do. I spend a lot of time looking at the finance demand supply side of things and enamored with the fact that there's nothing on earth that looks like this setup. It's a complete asymmetrical bet to the upside with I think, a floor in the price now that I don't think we'll see 15,500. So for me, I think this is going to be fun because nothing brings more adoption to Bitcoin than the number go up. So in the next couple of years, we could see some crazy adoption.
So I've got some questions for you then. Number one, okay, where do I want to go first? I think what's your impression of the last bull run? Because obviously there's a lot of factors there. Do you think that the paper Bitcoin that effectively was FTX, do you think that materially affected the price of Bitcoin through 2021?
Without a shadow of a doubt. And I've got a theory on this, which I'll share with you. What FTX did, that was probably conservatively, I think it would be fair to say it was the second largest exchange in the world at the time in 2021. And it came from nowhere, but it probably accounted for somewhere between 10 to 20% of global daily trade in Bitcoin and altcoins. And what came to light in the last 2 weeks was something that I thought was happening, but it was confirmed in the courtroom. And in effect, what was happening was FTX was selling Bitcoin to customers. They would hold that on their exchange. They would then loan that Bitcoin to Alameda, their trading arm. Alameda would then put that Bitcoin back on the exchange, immediately sell it, and then buy altcoins with it. So what that tells me happened in the last market is that we kind of got ripped off. What happened with the price of Bitcoin is that when you sell 10 to 15% or 20% of daily supply of Bitcoin, that suppresses the price dramatically. So in light of what came out in the courtroom, I'm absolutely shocked we were able to see a price of close to $70,000 US a Bitcoin. Like that, to me, with that much sell pressure, was completely unbelievable. And the really crazy thing about this is, and this is what's going to get really interesting for the markets moving forward, is I think altcoins massively outperformed in the last bull market. So what's happened up until the last cycle is that you've had altcoins outperform in an up market, and you've had Bitcoin underperform, but in a down market, Bitcoin outperforms the down market, and so it ends up higher long term. If, in light of what happened in the last sort of year or two with FTX, I don't know if we're going to see an altcoin rally and outperform Bitcoin moving forward, because we've got institutional money that's going to come into Bitcoin in the form of ETFs, and it's not going to flow on to any other coin. And so the institutional flows are going to flow into Bitcoin, and they're going to stop at Bitcoin. Whereas previously the flows would come in from retail into Bitcoin, and then they'd spill over into Ethereum and all the other shitcoins down the track. But I'm not sure if we're going to see that this cycle. And this is where, if your trading strategy is to try and get more Bitcoin by buying altcoins, I'm thinking that is a crazy strategy to pursue when, you know, you've got somewhere between a 5 and a 10 bagger in front of you just by holding Bitcoin. I think, you know, probably need to check yourself into Gamblers Anonymous if you think it's a good idea to take that risk. I just don't see on a risk-adjusted basis how you could ever justify it.
Okay, so I've got a follow-up question for you then. I would agree that you know, that typical kind of like wick to the absolute insanity that we saw in 2017 wasn't replicated, in part because you go to FTX and say, I'd like 1 Bitcoin, and they'd say, sure, and they would write 1 Bitcoin in your accounts without actually acquiring a single thing, and instead buy some Bahamas real estate. But nonetheless, do you think that to an extent that behavior gets replicated, maybe not initially, but down the line in TradFi and ETFs and all that stuff? And 2, I've got my 2-year-old son running into the room right now. Nonetheless, that's okay. We'll roll with the punches here. He's bullish too. He came in. He's super bullish. But anyways, does that behavior get replicated in the traditional finance world? And secondly, if it does the, how do I phrase this? does the inevitable fuck around and find out that happened to FTX and Quadriga before it, and I don't know, every other exchange that has done this same behavior, does that happen at a scale that we've not yet seen before if people go that route?
The short answer is yes, although I actually don't think it's going to happen in the ETF space. I don't think the ETFs hold an existential threat where they're going to blow up. I think the way the trust structures are set up and to be regulated on, the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ will prohibit a lot of that fuck around and find out, so to speak. Where I do think we are going to get an institutional style blow up, which will probably have a blowout effect on those ETFs, is when the banks start lending money on Bitcoin. Now, I think that we're within, say, 6 or 7 years of the banks lending money on Bitcoin. And within that 7-year period, they'll probably be taking or borrowing coins from the ETFs. That's when we'll have the Quadriga style blow up, where the banks will blow up. And this is where, your globally systemic important banks like Credit Suisse and Deutsche and a lot of the majors in the US are going to come under, I think, severe scrutiny, because you just, from a banking perspective, they've never had a hard stop with an asset that they can't reproduce out of thin air. So I think we are going to have that moment, but it's going to occur a little bit later than we think, when everyone's comfortable and doesn't think there's going to be a blow up. That's when we'll have it, and it'll probably be caused by the banking sector, not the ETF, but it will still hit the ETF sector.
Interesting. So what you're telling me is that there's a possibility that we may see people from Wall Street recreating this.
No doubt. No doubt.
I wouldn't be upset to see that image. If you're listening to this audio only on the pod, I just pulled up an image of like the Mount Gox people waiting outside with their signs, Mount Gox, where is our money? Except for it'll be BlackRock, where is our money? So like not outside the realm of possibility, but if I guess if you're a Bitcoiner and you've got good, if you've got something where you are able to self-custody and you learn the tools and you actually take self-custody, you're not subject to this kind of BS, right? Like you get to take the ride. It's a roller coaster, but you get to sit back and you get to watch all of it happen. Yeah, your purchasing power is going to swing back and forth if that comes to fruition. But at the same time, also, I just realized one of these guys is wearing Google Glass in that picture. It's so great. Anyways, nonetheless, you get to watch that play out, and you also get to realize that in no way does it affect the way that Bitcoin functions, and you get to ride that and know that it doesn't matter, because Bitcoin is just as useful as it ever was, and you'll still be there to be able to use it as you see fit. So I kind of want to get thoughts of the other gentlemen here. Maybe I'll, if that's okay, I'll toss it to Portland first for your thoughts. I know Portland, you don't talk price a lot. I know you talk like how these things work, but I am curious to hear like how averse are you to these TradFi things coming into Bitcoin? Are you just you don't care, like you don't pay attention to it, or like where are you at?
Yeah, so I don't really focus on those kind of sides like finance and the implications socially of Bitcoin on like institutional use, right? But at the same time, it is a thing that you inherently follow as a Bitcoiner. You see these things on your Twitter feed and people get excited about the price. But the most concerning thing to me about institutional scale adoption of Bitcoin is, just like you said, BTC sessions, when you self-custody, if there's an issue with the social consensus of Bitcoin, where we are determining a soft fork or worse, potentially a hard fork, like a Bcash situation, if you self-custody, don't care either way, because you get both sides when it splits, right? And usually, historically, the best thing to do is sell the hard fork of Bitcoin that does not follow Satoshi's rules financially. But nonetheless, you are afforded both coins. You could just literally hold them if you don't know what's going to happen, whatnot. Now you get institutions like BlackRock involved. They have massive stashes of Bitcoin in whatever self-custody solution they have, but you don't have the right as an individual to vote or do anything with the coins you have. And in the event of a split, what rights do you have to both sides? And for example, BlackRock's prospectus for their ETF says that, hey, if we split, we're allowed to sell whichever fork of Bitcoin we deem not to be Bitcoin. And they can take the cash profits from that and do whatever with that. But the fact is, you as the individual aren't afforded the ability to get both sides. That also has influence socially as well. If BlackRock, with their big hoard of Bitcoin that everybody's invested their real world time into trading energy for shares of something they don't actually custody, says we support, for example, something that most Bitcoiners don't support at the actual transactional level, well, they're going to have some sway in the social consensus of what is Bitcoin. If they support bigger blocks, some people will follow on that side. They will upgrade their nodes. They will attempt to fork Bitcoin. They may persuade miners. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of the social consensus and the weight that that entity represents by kind of custodying such a large amount of Bitcoin versus kind of having a nice distribution that is custodied amongst individuals. But the main thing is the individuals buying shares of ETFs or any other paper Bitcoin have no privilege or guarantee they will get both sides of any fork in the event of one. And so that's why self-custody is so beautiful, is you get these benefits that don't apply to an ETF, which is purely exposure to price. I mean, technically there could be redemption. One nice thing about a Bitcoin ETF compared to a gold ETF, in my own opinion, is theoretically they could prove ownership of the coins that they claim, right? So they could sign a message from an address they have. That is not possible with like any traditional gold ETF, etc. So that's very nice, and Bitcoin would shine in that regard. But yeah, in terms of price, Bitcoin will do its thing, whether or not regulatory approval happens. I feel this is horrible of me to say. It's inevitable because, like you guys were kind of talking about earlier, the blow-ups that happen of these institutions, they all kind of stem from one thing: rehypothecation or creation of paper Bitcoin that doesn't actually exist. I think that's actually one of humanity's greatest temptations, is always to create some sort of money to steal time from others or basically get an edge up. And just as governments print money from thin air, private institutions also attempt to create it. But Bitcoin is literally the mathematical anchor that you can't defy gravity. Like at the end of the day, you can always face check because it's a public ledger. So yeah, I think there's going to be absolutely some ETF is going to have an issue at some point, I believe, whether that be because somebody actually rugs the funds or there's a technical issue in the style of Prime Trust, for example, like, hey, we sent 80 million of Bitcoin to this address and our tech guy didn't actually program it right. We don't have a private key for that. So I think there will be little kind of mishaps like that that propagate and compound into much larger problems.
I like
that was a lot. I apologize.
No, that's good. So the thing I honed in on that I like what you said in around the fork. If first of all, if you're watching this right now, you're probably somebody who's more inclined to self-custody. And so, Portland, what you said in and around, what if Bitcoin forks, and what if BlackRock, for instance, says this is the real Bitcoin and this is not Bitcoin, and we're going to sell the other fork and prop up our existing fork. And the beautiful thing about that is we have a history lesson to learn from in that instance, right? We have the Bitcoin Cash fork and what happened there. And so what a lot of people thought would happen is that is that all of a sudden, like as these things split, there would be whatever one was worth, the other would be like, say there was original Bitcoin and then the split, and then whatever that was worth would be subtracted from the price of the original. But markets are not immediately efficient, right? And so that's not what happened in practice. You had kind of manipulation of prices, and you had things like Bitcoin didn't really drop all that much in price at the time, and then all of a sudden you had this other asset that was just suddenly apparently worth money because people were trading for it. And so, you know, for those that weren't around in 2017, what happens when there's a fork is you have private keys, and those private keys now govern both chains. They now govern your assets on both subsequent chains. So, you know, when Bitcoin existed and then Bcash split off, it wasn't that you had to make a choice. It was that you had your Bitcoin, and then all of a sudden you had Bitcoin Cash. And if you had no idea what was going on, you could have just sat on your thumb and you had both. But what some people did is they made a call and they decided, okay, the Bitcoin that I've always had is Bitcoin, and the new thing that exists is not. And so I'm going to sell that thing and then purchase more Bitcoin with that. And other people had the opposite opinion and said, hey, Bcash, this is the real Bitcoin, and we're gonna keep all that, and then we're gonna sell our Bitcoin, which technically right now is worth more than Bcash, but we see the opportunity, and we're gonna sell all our Bitcoin, and we're gonna buy a whole bunch of Bcash because the world at large doesn't know this is the real Bitcoin. Well, we all know how that turned out. Well, Bitcoin Cash is worth less than 1% of a Bitcoin now. And at its peak, you could have grabbed about 30% of a Bitcoin with a single Bcash, which is insane to me. But in an instance where, you know, BlackRock decides, you know what, we're gonna have top-down Bitcoin, and you know, we get to govern the chain, and we're going to install our own developers, much like was proposed with Bcash, or not Bcash, but SegWit 2x, that whole other debacle. I won't go deep into that, but nonetheless, we want our own developers. We want to basically take control of the protocol, and we're going to split it. Okay, so you have that instance. If you're sitting in the BlackRock ETF, that's what you fucking get. You get that thing. Okay, so wonderful. If you're sitting in self-custody, you get both. And if you don't know how things are going to play out, you sit on your thumb and you have both. If you think, if you've got a long time horizon and you can ride out BlackRock to the bitter end, you sell your BlackRock Bitcoin and you buy more actual Bitcoin. If you think that legacy finance is going to win and it's, you know, Bitcoin's going to be washed out, you do the opposite. I wouldn't bank on that, but nonetheless, you know, you make your call. But worst case scenario, if you take the responsibility and you take self-custody, you get to choose. You get to do one or the other or nothing, and you're not losing something in the process if you sit on your thumb because you have both. Okay, the nightmare scenario happens. BlackRock continues to rule the world. We get BlackRock sanctioned Bitcoin, and that's it. Well, I mean, you got that, I guess, and then you've got your freedom money off to the side. It has less purchasing power, but you can still make your own little circular economy. But at the end of the day, if you sit and wait it out, BlackRock wins, but you still say fuck BlackRock. Well, your BlackRock Bitcoin is worth more. Sell it. Go buy your freedom money. There you go. So again, self-custody is the key here. Would you agree, Portland?
Absolutely. You get none of the properties of Bitcoin without self-custodying Bitcoin, because you don't actually own Bitcoin if you don't self-custody it. We're talking about some of the advances in Bitcoin and how we have moved forward in making things easier, faster, and just overall better for Bitcoiners. But that is the one thing deep down I don't think you can avoid as a Bitcoiner, or at the bottom, like you drill it all the way down. The one thing you can't take away, there is an element of personal responsibility for the solution to your private key to sign the message. That can be securely stored in about 12 words. There will be no way of ever removing that wholly from Bitcoin and having pure self-custody. You can do trade-offs with other things, multi-sig, etc. But to actually just like hold your keys, you have to be responsible as a human being for 128 bits of information at minimum, or 12 words, to securely store wealth. And yeah, that if you don't have that personal responsibility, you don't hold the keys to your Bitcoin, you don't have Bitcoin. You have a SQL database entry on some server that says somebody else owes you the Bitcoin that they have the keys for. And that's you get nothing when you do that. You get trust maximized solutions for Bitcoin. You have to trust the exchange is doing everything right. It's not trustless at that point. If Bitcoin forks, you have to trust the exchange is going to give you both halves. Like, the whole thing is trust. But by just taking self-custody and taking that personal responsibility for those bits of information, that is the secret solution to your little math problem to spend your money. The whole thing, you get what Satoshi wanted you to have. And I think Satoshi even mentions that a lot of the properties of Bitcoin are lost if you don't apply this model. So yeah, at the end of the day, self-custody is Bitcoin. You have keys to spend money, or even, sorry to say, send messages. You could literally use your Bitcoin. If you stash up a whole Bitcoin and you wanted to put your novel on the blockchain, you could give the miners all the fees and just write messages on the time chain. Like, that is, it's just beautiful. So yeah,
I love it. I want to get Rafa's thoughts on this really quick though. Portland, there's some concern in the chat. Are you boiling? Portland needs AC in there. Are you doing okay?
No, I'm not boiling. I'm fine. I always sweat.
Okay. They didn't want you to, you see a pet in a car with the windows rolled up. you don't want.
Yeah, no, I'm doing good.
Yeah. Okay.
Melt your brain.
Just making sure. Awesome. Rafa, I want to toss it to you. Thoughts on everything we're talking about here?
I think the institutional adoption is going to be huge, of course. But I agree with Portland. There is a lesson to be learned on self-custody that a lot of people are going to have to learn, and the way to learn it is something going to blow up at some point, like Peter said. Maybe 6 years. I don't know how long, but it will. It's inevitable, I feel.
Yeah.
But I'm happy, like, anything that brings more adoption into Bitcoin. Like, adoption starts through interest, right? The first time I saw Bitcoin, I didn't just get Bitcoin. I was like, what is this? I want to learn about it. I want some Bitcoin. Getting Bitcoin was like the third step in my sort of process. Mm-hmm. And so, the first thing is getting people interested in Bitcoin, and through the ETF, I think that's going to happen.
And part of the learning curve for Bitcoin, one of the elements of it is that Bitcoin is a cruel but effective teacher, and through mistakes you learn what not to do with your Bitcoin. so like how many times have you made a stupid little mistake and put Bitcoin in a wallet, not backed it up, or over the past number of years you go and you speculate on something before you realize that Bitcoin is kind of the true store of value, or you go out and in seek of yield and turns out that you were the yield, like all of those little lessons along the way, as unfortunate and as painful as they are, they mold you into a better Bitcoiner, and it better informs you of how to actually gauge risk, right? It's this is kind of the thing that we're not taught financially growing up is how to gauge risk, because we're babysat the whole way. We're told be responsible for this, that, and the other thing, but not your money. You can't possibly have the cognitive capacity to take care of your own wealth. You got to put that off to somebody else. And when you do, there's a trade-off. And I'm talking specifically in the traditional finance system, because that when you do that, it comes with the trade-off of debasement and rehypothecation and all these other things that dilute the money that you're trying to save and the purchasing power you're trying to preserve. And so, in a worst case scenario, like we've kind of discussed, that's also good for Bitcoin in a way, because people look at that, and at the end of the day, yeah, there'll be a lot of noise at the time if it happens, but at the end of the day, you look at that situation and you go, who wasn't hurt? The people that took self-custody. And so I think there's a lesson to be learned in that, and that will help a lot of people, even if it hurts a lot of people in the interim.
Ben, you raise a really good point there that I think TradFi's got the perfect foil to avoid people adopting Bitcoin. And that is probably one of the first financial lessons we're given is if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So a lot of people pass over Bitcoin thinking, it can't possibly be all that these crazy people think about. And so they just bypass it altogether. And then, that's probably a good thing for Bitcoiners too, in that it takes a lot of time and effort, energy to actually go down the rabbit hole and actually have a deep understanding of it to really understand the benefits that it can bring, and that it actually is all that it's cracked up to be, and it's not too good to be true. It's, there's no such thing as a free lunch, but you self-custody your Bitcoin, to your point, and everyone on here, you avoid all of the calamity that happens in the traditional financial sector, and sort of sharing an experience we've had, helping clients self-custody for the last, say, 4 or 5 years. A lot of clients would be like, there's so much time and effort goes into doing all of this. Why do I really need this? And then FTX happens in last November, and it's a complete game changer for, thanks very much for helping us with our self-custody. We're really happy we don't have to be exposed to that show that's going on over there. So
a lot of lessons were learned in that period when that happened.
Yeah, it's again, it's every time a new lesson is taught, and I mean, it's there's been plenty, but you had Mt. Gox, you had Quadriga, you had the speculation in altcoins and the washouts, and that's kind of like a cyclical thing, because as new people come in, they're always looking for the new, what will give me what Bitcoin has given others, and the answer is nothing. But you need to kind of experience the up and down of that to kind of understand it, or at least that was the case prior. Maybe not as much anymore. There's more people that are going to Bitcoin very shortly after kind of entering the space, which is great to see. But all of these lessons get learned, and even the people that end up settling on Bitcoin only, there's still lessons to learn. And in the last cycle, the lesson was in and around leverage, and what do you seek yield on your Bitcoin? Like you've understood what the best asset is and why it's different from everything else, and then you've been conditioned to think this way, but you think to yourself, I've got the scarcest soundest money known to mankind, but I need an extra X percent. And so it's like, it's just this natural kind of fiat tendency has been baked into us. It's in our bones, and we're, you got to try and rid yourself of that. So there's always new lessons to be learned. And I'm not convinced that Bitcoiners are done learning lessons yet. And I'm curious to see what the next set of lessons is through the next market is. And my inclination is that we're not done with the lesson of self-custody, but I think we're also just beginning the lesson of privacy. And I think for the most part, I don't think many people are ready for that one, myself included, unfortunately. So, I mean, I've got a streak in my hair. I'm on the internet, so I pretty much fucked in that department. But nonetheless, I do my best. But anyways, so gentlemen, I'm going to do a rotation here. I enjoyed the rabbit hole that we went down with this one. I thought it was quite interesting, but nonetheless,
Can I ask one more question?
yes.
I got a question for Peter. Gary Gensler walks up to you. You're his decision maker for today. He gives you a forced dichotomy. You can choose between the ETF tomorrow being approved, or you can choose the ETF being approved exactly 1 year from today. Which one would you choose?
Good question. Portland Hodl. Ouch.
Wait, are you trying to line him up to admit to want to execute on insider trading?
No. I'm just trying to. Gary asked me to ask him this, so
Okay.
yeah, I'm just trying to get his thoughts on this. And but no, I have a quick theory on this. I want to bring up, and you can tell me how wrong I am. And by the way, my battery's at 20%, so
Okay.
I'm going to be fine. But just let you know. But yeah, so that is my question to you. Gary's come to you. Will you approve the ETF tomorrow, or exactly 365 days from?
Personally, 365, because it gives me time to stack cheap sats. I know the second that's approved, it's a floodgate for tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars, and we're never going back. And the other thing that a lot of people don't really understand about that ETF money is it's really sticky money. It's inconsequential money in people's portfolios. So, you know, a 5 to 10% allocation into Bitcoin is sticky. It's going to stay there, and it's not really going to get cycled out of there because it's going to be part of a 1 to 5 year, well, a 2 to 10 year strategy for most financial advisors. So I'd like the next 12 months to stack some more cheap sats.
Sweet. So somebody says fix my sound. Is everything okay still?
You're good.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Good.
Yeah. So awesome. So this is the most fiat minded thing you'll hear from me. But the reason why I like the 1 year time frame instead of tomorrow is I believe Bitcoin is inevitably going to pump as it does with every cycle.
Yeah. And
I would rather have the ETF come when Bitcoin is some very crazy number and push the hype into some stupid number than get, for example, like you choose Gary's option of tomorrow and we go to 30 to 45K overnight. And then there's some other like little run to 50, you know, if I could, I'm okay waiting, you know, like my time horizon is so deep, like just let this thing happen. And then also it gives more people a chance to build better tools for Bitcoin. So to get to that point.
On that Hodl, the only thing I'd say, if that question was slightly differently defined, would you take hyper Bitcoinization tomorrow as opposed to 12 months time? I'd take hyper Bitcoinization.
No, I would not take hyper Bitcoinization tomorrow. I do not think the Bitcoin protocol or network is ready to handle that. And I think it would cause some pretty substantial issues with individuals not basically being able to custody their Bitcoin properly and causing just as much pain as rugs would be. I just think that we are still so early into people understanding what Bitcoin is at a technological level. Like most people in traditional finance get into Bitcoin, the structure of even blocks is just a completely foreign concept. And I would hate to see we rush hyper Bitcoinization and figure out that a lot of institutions weren't ready to be custodying people's time and value. And these tools that keep getting built all the time, we even have stuff like silent payments coming up that are going to be incredibly cool and allow people to preserve, like you said, BTC sessions privacy. Bitcoin, I think it's going to be slower than most expect in terms of the hyper Bitcoinization. I would love to see it. I just don't think we technologically are ready for hyper Bitcoinization in terms of just people's fundamental understanding of how Bitcoin works. And there are the consequences it presents. Like in computer science, most things don't actually really matter too much. Like if you're building rockets and cars, safety, yes, that's why people are very well educated. There are very good practices for this. But usually most mistakes like at Meta or Facebook, the worst you can do is you can crash the service and cost them a bunch of revenue. With Bitcoin, if, for example, you send F2 Pool a $500,000 fee, which happened because of your code being messed up, you're kind of at the mercy of them being the good guy or potentially giving it back to you. It might be a bad action to do that. But yeah, overall, I just think that Bitcoin developers and people that develop on Bitcoin need just more time to build very robust industrial grade tools before we start kind of, hey world, we're 100% ready for 8 billion people to come on Bitcoin. And then the last kind of note on that is there is a block-based demand, right? And we don't have right now the tools to on-chain everybody tomorrow. Like we can do quite a few people, but 8 billion is not happening. I don't believe long-term it even needs to. We will get there. Yeah. But as of tomorrow, no, there's no hyper Bitcoinization that will happen tomorrow. Just purely on the basis that we're not ready technologically in terms of the protocol. And second, there's the block space demand. It's not there.
Yeah.
Like the demand's there, just the supply of block space, and you can't waver on that block space, because once you get rid of the property of decentralization, you've killed off what makes Bitcoin work, like what Bitcoin is. So those are kind of my thoughts.
Interesting. Portland, I'm gonna keep it with you because I want to put a bow on this topic, and you're up last. You got your reason for being bullish. I know that your battery is wasting away in to quote the chat. Apparently you're not in a car, it's a green screen, you're actually in a microwave.
Yes, you got it.
Yeah, but nonetheless, I'm going to throw it to you, and I'm going to cue you up again. Same question as the other gentleman. Why are you bullish? Take it away.
Why am I bullish on Bitcoin? Right now, in terms of the development space, this is the first time I haven't been able to actively keep up with the number of projects happening on Bitcoin. Like it used to be, there were a couple little wallets you got to keep track of and stuff like that. But now you have self-custody solutions coming from Block coming out, which looks very interesting. You have BitVM, which just came out as well, as that looks incredible in terms of an ability to prove something happened on chain, prove that the output is correct. So something happened. There are still flaws with it. It's not perfect. But yeah, visiting TabConf and seeing all the stuff happening on top of Lightning, Doppler, which is a way to test all the Lightning clients to make sure they integrate well together. It's just absolutely amazing. Even the developments on Bitcoin Core that we've been getting recently, we just got Assume UTXO, which allows somebody, instead of having to sync the entire time chain, they can just download the UTXO set and download the blocks past that to start using their client in a trustless manner. And then they can fill in the gaps all the way up to the UTXO set as they download those first blocks. But you can basically jump to block 800,000 by downloading just the UTXO set at that point, and then sync up the next like 10,000 blocks. And you can have potentially a Lightning node that works, because that's what really matters is the UTXO set. Everything that's been spent isn't really as useful. Like it's good for historically validating that the Bitcoin you use is Bitcoin. But at the same time, you don't usually reference that. When you spend Bitcoin, you're referencing that UTXO set. So with all of that, yeah, that's one thing I'm very excited about, is the fact that there are so many developments on Bitcoin. And one of those developments that I thought was really cool was the seed vault. And that was created by Coldcard. And in version 5.2.0, which I think 2 weeks ago roughly came out, they added the ability to store multiple seed phrases or XPrivs inside of your Coldcard's main storage. It doesn't actually secure it in the secure element. It's encrypted by your private key. But at the same time, now you can, for example, what I did was I was able to take my Nostr public or Nostr private key and convert it into a seed phrase, and then I backed it up on my Coldcard. So my Nostr private key is there. I took all of these little paper wallets I've been handing out that haven't been cashed in as well, and I put them all in my little seed vault so I can now keep track of them. I don't have to have these little pieces of paper with seed phrases written down anymore on them. And then I also did the last thing. I was able to take a BIP85 derived child, put it into the seed vault. So I export the XPriv, the private key of the child, and then I into the seed vault, and then I use that as a new master private key where I can now BIP85 more private keys from it. So you could like do this like cascading chain of private keys from BIP85. So yeah, the seed vault is a very interesting little thing that is available as an experimental feature in the Coldcard. So yeah, I think those are the kind of the two things mainly, is just the pace of development on Bitcoin has finally gotten to be so fast that even I can't keep up with all of the things that are coming out now.
I'm going to echo you there in terms of not being able to keep up. Again, as a person that's coming from the realm of trying to make tutorials and stuff, I remember distinctly starting the channel and people being like, are you going to run out of stuff to do? No, no, not at all. You should see my list of tutorials that I would love to do. It would take me into mid next year. It's like they'll never be done. They will never ever be done, because there's always going to be. So it becomes like, what can I get to and what are people pestering me the most about. It's a mix of like, what do I really want to cover and what won't people shut up about, which turns into what do I really want to cover. And sometimes I drag my heels on things, but other times I'm just like, I'm going to do this. But there's so much. And you mentioned a couple things there that I haven't even had time to look at what they are, let alone the implications of what they could potentially do down the line, because I'm so busy just trying to cover what currently exists. So I feel like I've now fallen out of the realm of being able to understand what's coming down the pipeline and what these new innovations will enable in the future. And I'm barely able to catch up with the stuff that anybody could currently access. And that's wild, because we're coming kind of from different realms here, right? Like you're in and around the like, wow, this new development, this new
software.
This new software, and like there's no like client side like easy access for some of these things that you're talking about. There's no like, oh, I just have an app that I can download, and that's typically my entry point of how do you now use this. And so like you're saying you can't keep up, and I'm saying I can't even start to look at the stuff that you're looking at right now, and that's kind of, as much as to me it's frustrating, and probably to you as well, where you're like, I want to know all this stuff. It's also kind of a great place to be in, because you realize how much is going on and how much is happening, and what it will be like in a few years from now, a decade from now. I can't even imagine. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I'm gonna have to dive into Seed Vault. I have not yet. That's on the list that goes into next year. Oh, there goes Portland. That's okay. He'll sneak back in when he gets a chance. Nonetheless, he got his reason out. But yeah, Seed Vault he was talking about. That's maybe one of the next things on the docket that I'm going to try and cover. But yeah, what a great reason to be bullish. Not being able to keep up. That's the best reason I could imagine. So, gentlemen, maybe I'll go to Rafa first, and then I'll go to Peter. But Rafa, like, how are you doing with keeping up with everything that's going on Bitcoin?
Well, I gave up a long time ago. You have to specialize. So I was CTO at a Lightning payments company before doing this, and I was in the Lightning world, I think I learned enough. But now I've stopped paying attention to the developments in Lightning. I just don't have enough time. There is so much stuff going on. I went to TabConf this year as well, and it's just like, this is ridiculous. This is just too much. And you have to, pick what you're interested in and explore it. I mean, you're never gonna know everything. But listen to people, just like you were saying, Mutiny Wallet. I just, downloaded the PWA on my phone right now. I'm gonna start playing with it. Listen to others. I think that's the lesson that I learned when I first looked at the Bitcoin white paper back in 2011. Listen to other people.
Yeah, 100%. Like there's a lot of people in and around Bitcoin doing a lot of different things, but I think as things become usable and as things become more and more important, you're going to hear especially like if you're in Bitcoin now and you're kind of honing in on the signal, you're going to be alerted to when something is important, and then you'll be able to focus some time on that. I think that's kind of been my guiding light through a lot of this. Is I start to see, the people that have previously pointed out some of the important developments, and they're pointing at something new, and that piques my interest for sure. So I think Portland has managed to. There we go. We were worried that the car lighter didn't quite have the juice to keep you going.
No, it does not support MacBook 2015 edition. No, I can use my phone for a little bit. The audio isn't as great, and I apologize for the production quality being degraded just slightly.
You're all good. No, it's good. We're just starting to kind of round out. I was getting Rafa's thoughts. I'm going to get Peter's thoughts here as well as to what you were talking about. Peter, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I've got to say, I don't envy you, Ben, having to sort out and sort what sort of developments you want to keep track of. For me, it's a little bit simpler. We play in the collaborative custody space, so at the moment I can keep up with the developments in that space, and the work with Nunchuk and Swan, the rest of it. Everyone's coming to market with great options in that capacity, and I can keep up with it for at this point in time. But there's developments coming with Miniscript and Anchor Watch and Wizard Sardine, and all those guys are literally coming into this space that makes it harder and harder to keep up. And I'm sure within 6 months I'll have trouble keeping up with all of it too. So I think it's a really positive thing that these developments are coming, because it only improves user experience. And from a personal point of view, not coming from the technical side of it, it's really hard work to keep up with, but it's so good from a user experience perspective to get people onboarded. I look at some of the innovations that are happening. I look at what Nunchuk does with the tap signer and a multi-sig. Like, that stuff's just wild, like, as far as an improvement and user experience improvement goes relative to what else is out there. And I just think just portioning off a period of time each week to make sure I'm up to date and current so that clients have the best is the best I can hope for. But as these things get built out, the niche and the specialty gets more and more focused. So I guess I've just got to give up on the broader network and focus on what I'm doing.
There's value in being specialized, though, right? Like that's kind of what allows you to carve out a niche, right? Like I think, as to what you're talking about, collaborative custody, holy crap, has there ever been leaps and strides in just that? And again, it's the answer to, I'm worried about my personal responsibility, and prior to this I would have just given up custody to a full custodian. That collaborative custody option is something where you get kind of that insurance policy without giving up like actual custody of your stuff, right? Like you have a single key. Obviously, in some of these instances, there's privacy to contend with depending on the tool that you're using. But at the end of the day, the custody, the ability to move coins, lies with you. And at worst case, it lies, like, if you lose almost everything you're supposed to hold and you have just one key left, then it lies as an agreement between you and the company to at least sign the other part of that transaction, which would be, like, if they didn't agree to that, could be quite detrimental to the business. Exactly. So like you've got these options out there, but like in terms of just multi-sig, right? You've got the full do it yourself, right? You've got, do it in Sparrow, or do it in Nunchuk, or do it in Spectre, or do it in all of these other options. You've got the collaborative custody space where you've got, Nunchuk is absolutely killing it. Unchained does a great job. You've got options like Casa, and then you've got other ones that are new, like Keeper app is another one. You've got Kisa, I think, is the other Thea. Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of. That's a pretty new one that I haven't been able to play with yet. But like, you're starting to see these options, and then what Nunchuk is doing with the idea of Byzantine, where you can have their suite of tools, like they've got these tools that are available, but then you can have an individual, like effectively an advisor, where that advisor becomes the person that actually holds the extra key, and they have clients, and you're just using the software set, but like Nunchuk doesn't even house the extra key, the advisor does, and then the client keeps the other keys, and Nunchuk basically doesn't have a hand in that situation. Like you've got all of these things happening, and Unchained has rolled out a similar thing, but for institutions where you have an advisor holding a key. And if I'm not mistaken, Unchained isn't in that equation, but you're using their software. there's so much happening there, just in your space.
Yeah,
And so,
I know.
like specialization, I think is going to be key moving forward. And even like for myself, coming into Bitcoin early, yeah, I started with tutorials. I started doing shows like this and everything. But like at the end of the day, I recognize that my wheelhouse is I'm gonna make tutorials, and that's gonna be that's my thing. I mean, I don't want to like at all diminish like having these awesome conversations, because I love them and I get to rant about all the cool shit that I get to do all week when I'm not doing them. But like, how many podcasts are there? There's a million podcasts. There's a million Bitcoin podcasts out there. And so I recognize that I need to specialize somewhere in order to hold a candle to anybody else doing anything else. And so, tutorials are the realm. But like, Portland, you're so right. There's so much going on. It's impossible to keep up. And so there is a specialization of labor happening here, and it will continue, and it will become very distinct in the years to come, is my takeaway here.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. One example that leads into specialization is in the animal kingdom. How does the species survive? It has to have a niche, right? You can't just be a jack of all trades. You have to be a master of one, or have one unique thing to allow you to survive. BTC sessions, like, that's your way of kind of surviving the Bitcoin ecosystem and differentiating yourself from these other podcasts, is you have educational content, tutorials, and you present them in a very palatable manner for a lot of people. And that's very appreciated. And so same thing, even with me as well. I do Bitcoin education on Twitter, and I kind of do, like, my specialization is just slideshows. But also on the development side, aside from that, I kind of, like, this might sound bad, but I realize I'm not going to ever be able to master Lightning, because Lightning as a protocol and an implementation is pretty flexible, right? So it's always going to be evolving. I'm going to be always behind somebody by one step. But I realized the base layer offered some unique advantages to work on, like Bitcoin Core, because it's so slow moving. You can, once you understand kind of how the parts of it work, you can cement that in your mind forever, and you'll always technically be useful. And so that's why I really like working on the base layer. It's not as rewarding as Lightning, because everything moves so slow. Getting a PR merge can take months for a simple error message. But nonetheless, it forces you to learn about Bitcoin. And once you understand these things, they don't go away, because that is the base layer. That is the set of rules Satoshi created and set out for all of us to follow as consensus. And so, yeah, specialization is, in my own opinion, very key. There will always be a place for people to be general, but to survive, you got to have something very unique and very cool about what you do compared to everybody else.
100%. Well, gentlemen, I think we've reached the point in the show. We're going to start to round things out. And the way I like to end every show is, of course, we'll do a quick round. If you have any final thoughts, anything you didn't get off your chest that you want to throw out there at the end, or just, any sort of closing, we'll do that. But I also like to challenge my guests to throw out a recommendation, and that recommendation can come in any form that you see fit. So examples is, maybe it is an app or device that you really enjoy. Maybe it is a book or a podcast or an article that you saw that you really enjoyed. Or maybe it's just a personal experience and a bit of life advice that you think would be valuable for somebody watching or listening. So whatever you see fit, I'll start us off so you have a moment to stew with that. But in terms of my final thoughts on this, I love where we've ended up. And that is that things are moving very quickly, and that all of us are going to have trouble keeping up. And so I think for those in the room now and those that are watching and listening, you're going to have to start to whittle down to, why are you here? What is most important to you? And what do you want to be most on top of as things move forward? I would argue that self-custody best practices should be somewhere near the top of that list, if not the very top of that list. And then everything else should be, subsequent afterwards. Maybe you want to be a Lightning aficionado. Maybe you want to be on top of the latest things with privacy. Maybe you want to be on top of with just what's in the news and like how legacy finance is dealing with the reality of Bitcoin existing, whatever that may be. But I think definitely prioritizing being able to secure your Bitcoin against seizure and theft and all those things should be a very important thing to you. In terms of recommendations, I guess to jump back to my prior original topic that I started with, I would love for you guys that are watching to check out the idea of starting to utilize BIP85. If you've got a cold card or a seed signer, and I can't recall what other devices allow you to utilize this feature, but if you've got one of those devices for sure, look into using BIP85. I do have a tutorial on how to do it with cold card, but if you've got a device like that and you're going, God, how in the hell do I keep track of all of these other seed phrases for all these hot wallets and all this crap that I've got going? I've gradually, over the past few months here, been migrating and taking old wallets that I used to use regularly and switching out the ones that I used to use to new seed phrases generated through BIP85. And that just gives me that peace of mind of like, hey, I've got all of these wallets that I use, and sometimes I stop using them for whatever reason. But at any point in the future, if I delete those apps, I can go back, I can go to my cold card and pair it with a little, just a little spreadsheet where I say which path leads to what wallet that I used to have. And I can check those seed phrases, be like, are there sats there? Because what is $5, $10, $20 today may be far greater than that in the future. And you don't want to be looking through old wallet balances that you may not have access to anymore, and realizing that the $50 sitting in a wallet 10 years ago is now, $5,000. So like, don't let that be you, and maybe take a peek at BIP85 and it will streamline a lot of things for you moving forward. I think it's a pretty cool tool to be used. And you can find that. I think it's called I did a video called Uncle Jim Mode BIP85. You should be able to find it somewhere. But nonetheless, we're going to get final thoughts from everybody else here. Peter, I'm going to go to you first. Any final thoughts and any recommendation you may have? Go ahead.
Final thought, I can't wait to look into that BIP85 for what we do. And I'm sure there's going to be connotations and permutations that we can implement from a business perspective. So thanks for bringing that up. As far as any recommendations go, I think in light of what we talked about, probably it's quite prescient to think about mastery and making sure if you are focused on something, you get really good at it and continue to carve out that niche. So one of my all-time favorite books is a book called Mastery by George Leonard, and it's a fabulous book. It's an easy read, and if someone's got time, have a read of it. It's a lot of life lessons in there that I think are really practical and you can implement very easily. Awesome.
I just looked it up so I could add it to my reading list. Awesome. Great. Rafa, I'm going to go to you. Any final thoughts, recommendations? Go ahead.
So anybody who works in government or knows people that work in government, I would recommend checking out open timestamps and timestamping official public documents. I think that's an easy way to certify what the time that a document was created. So I would recommend people go to opentimestamps.org and checking that out. That's what we use.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah. And check out that documentary. Again, Immutable Democracy. It's on the Simple Proof YouTube channel. It's a good watch, and it's only like 16 or 17 minutes. Portland, last to you. Final thoughts, recommendations. Go ahead, man.
First of all, I want to say thank you for hosting this podcast. It was extremely excellent, especially seeing how open timestamps is being used to validate or at least improve election integrity. Some of the price talk as well on like kind of the volume of money that exists out that needs Bitcoin to harbor it. Like it has to come in. And that was really nice to hear as well. Yeah, so at the end of the day, I have a kind of my recommendation. And this isn't something I would suggest anybody take action on because it could potentially be dangerous. But I think everybody should be asking themselves the question, if my hardware wallet broke today, would I be able to recover my Bitcoin successfully? How does your seed phrase backup or multi-sig solution play into you being able to recover that? Because I feel that everybody needs to have that moment, because cold cards can fail, jades can fail. All these devices are millions of little tiny transistors that you plug into a 5-volt USB port. They all have to like perform this orchestra to bring up a screen to be able to sign your checks or your transactions.
I like that. Yeah. I mean, you got to practice every moment of that, right? I don't know if Portland just dropped his connection or not. I think so. No. Mid rant. I felt like it ended a little premature there. Is he still there? No, I don't think so. That's too bad.
It was a good rant.
Yeah,
It's good while it lasted.
it was very passionate. I was like, oh, that ended very quickly. I guess I should comment on it. Nonetheless, I get what he's going at. Is you need to be resilient to not relying on just the piece of hardware that you've used, as I think where he was going with this. And so, at the end of the day, you've got BIP85, you've got a seed phrase, you've got all of that. What do you do if your cold card stops working? Do you know how to just get from your 24 words to recover everything that you have? And if the answer is no, then you need to practice that. But I think it's a good point. I think, again, if you've set up your, I think a good practice for everyone, if you have set up a hardware device and that is your life savings, and you didn't go through the process of wiping that device and then re-importing the seed phrase to make sure it works, then it's in your best interest to buy a second hardware device and then try importing that seed phrase to the new hardware device and see if it still works. Why do I say buy a second one? Because you don't want to wipe the existing one and try the import process and realize that your import is no good. All right. And you also don't want to import your savings to a hotkey on like a phone or a computer, right? You want to keep that wallet cold. So what you need to do, if you've not gone through that process, is look at getting a secondary device. It could be a cheap one, whatever. Like blocks from Jades are pretty affordable. Go get take your seed phrase, import it to Jade, and then see if you can recover your wallet and its entirety and the value held therein with your seed phrase. And if the answer is no, then what you need to do immediately is create a new seed phrase on a new device, perhaps the one you were testing on, and take the money that you had and move it from the previous device to the new one, because you clearly did not properly take down that seed phrase, and you don't want to only rely on a single piece of hardware for recovery. And a perfect example of that, we were doing a workshop in LA after Pacific Bitcoin. I was doing a cold card workshop. We were doing exactly that. I sent $10 to each person in the workshop and had them test a transaction, just like a self-transfer. And then I said, okay, we're all going to wipe our cold cards. And then when we got to that point, we did the recovery. Somebody put in the recovery, didn't work. Luckily, post workshop, there's a dude named Travis, and he took the seed phrase and he was experimenting around, seeing what could have been wrong. And one of the words that was very similar to another word in the BIP BIP 39 seed word list ended up being the solution on one of the words. And so it's just a case in point when you're going and you're checking and it says what was word number, whatever, and it gives you 3 options. Oftentimes your eye will just go to the first letter and not notice if you've actually noted the whole word correctly. And then when you go to recover it, you put in the word and it starts with the same letter that you noted, but it may not be the correct word. So it's very important that you take note of those things. You gotta be careful. But nonetheless, I'm on a rant here at the end of the show. I'm going to wrap it out, gentlemen. Again, Peter, Rafa, and our dearly departed Portland. I appreciate all your guys' time. This was an absolute awesome show. What a good time. And everybody watching, all their X handles, can't believe I just said that. Their Twitter handles are in the show notes. You can go follow them there. And then from there, you'll be able to find out other information. Also, check out the Immutable Democracy video over on YouTube. But guys, thank you so much for your time on a Friday evening. I very much appreciate it.
Great to spend it with you guys. Really appreciate what you do. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Peter. And
Great
thanks
talking to you guys.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good night. Cheers. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. And again, thank you guys for the guests. Go follow them all on Twitter. And again, with what Rafa's working on, again, Immutable Democracy on YouTube. And it's a good 16-minute watch. And it's from Simple Proof. If anything else pops up, that's the one you're looking for. So super awesome to watch. And again, Portland, what a legend, what an awesome dude. And super glad to have him as well, doing the whole pod from either the back of a car or a green screen, depending on who you believe in the chat. But this was a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for being here. Of course, if you want to help out the show, you can do a few things. You can hit that like button just below the screen, smash that like button. That helps a ton. You can also share this episode out on whatever social media platforms you happen to be on. And of course, if you're not already, please do subscribe. That is massive. And I'm one day, much like the elusive 100K Bitcoin, I will hit that elusive 100K subscribers. I'm in the low 80s right now. So help me get there. Also, if you want to help the show, you can hit up the previously mentioned sponsors, Hodl, CoinKite, Nunchuk, Seedor, Start9, all those guys. They're listed down below. And if you really liked what you saw, and if you're having trouble, maybe you need some help, some hand holding, maybe the tutorials that I've got listed on YouTube are not quite enough and you just need some extra assurance, you can always reach out. There's a QR code on the screen right now that'll take you to my website, btcsessions.ca, and there you can book me for one-on-ones. So if you need some help setting up hardware or mastering multi-sig or trying out Lightning or whatever it may be, you can contact me there. Anyways, guys, I am out. Thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. Have a wonderful evening, a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you guys next time for your daily session.
Hodl the Bitcoin.